Welcome back, everybody. I guess we're going to get started now on the training portion of this. For this part, I'm just going to share my screen really quick. And if everything worked right, you should be seeing my desktop with the FileWave knowledge base.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to do kind of two training sessions, one on custom fields and one talking about single sign-on, specifically with Octa, but the same thing would work for Azure as well. And then the third one will be done by Bao, and that'll be about customizing the kiosk application. So hopefully there's something for everybody amongst these three things, and we'll get started. So, okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was custom fields. And I guess, Bao, if you're watching the chat, you can chime in if somebody has a question, or Tony, if you noticed. But we're gonna talk about custom fields because not everyone might use them. They're really powerful. And you could do, virtually anything you want to do with them. So in the FileWave knowledge base, you will notice that there's an Alliance eMeeting training. And what I wanted to do to make it easy for people to get to content was I just basically tagged the things related to these three sessions from today. So you can easily, go back there, and I might provide some additional examples that I'll add to this tag. And from eMeeting to eMeeting, we might add things to this, just again, to make it easy to get to, okay? So, let's take a look at custom fields, what they do, where you set them. I'm gonna show in my FileWave admin, you're gonna see that I have some devices here, and I have some fields here that don't exist, in your console necessarily. So I have display model, and you can see, for instance, here's my HP monitor. Here's an LG monitor. I decided that I wanted to figure out for my different machines what kind of display was connected. Here I had a field that would tell me whether PowerShell was running in 64-bit or not. And obviously if it's a Mac, it's not running PowerShell, although you can actually run PowerShell on the Mac. There's a way, but in general, this field was about figuring out on Windows if PowerShell was running in 64-bit or not. And then this other field would show me the volume key for BitLocker encryption. There's not something native in FileWave to store volume keys for BitLocker, but by using a custom field, I could actually store those recovery keys and be able to recover from a volume losing it if I didn't have another way to escrow them. So I guess the first thing is, how do you use these custom fields? So you just go in the admin, go here to custom fields, and go to edit custom fields. And you should be able to see that these are the fields that I have in my server. And I have the BitLocker key here. And for every custom field, you're going to give it a name. That's going to have this internal name. And the internal name can be used for things like the API, for instance. And you can give it a description. If you work with lots of folks and the field isn't really obvious about what it's for, then it may be important to put a good description on it, but it's not required. And then in particular, I'm going to talk about client scripts here. So client scripts are running something on Mac or Windows to get back some data. Right? In my case, I assign them to all my devices, but you don't have to. You can make a field and you can actually assign it to specific devices. And you can also restrict what values can come back. So I could have a table of acceptable return results, and only the things that match might be valid. I could also use a default value. So when you make a custom field, maybe you don't want it to be blank for everything. You want to kind of know, is it in a pending state waiting for the first results? So I chose to have it show pending at first. Okay, and then when you come down here to scripting, you can choose what language you want to do this in. I tend to do things in shell when it comes to the Mac. And so for the Mac, I just have it echo back not applicable because a Mac's not going to have a BitLocker encryption key. On the Windows side, again, I can pick different languages. I tend to do things in PowerShell on Windows. And then this script will run and will echo out what I want to show in the field. So in this case, it'll show the mount point, which is like C colon, and the recovery key. And actually, if you have, let's say you had 5 drives, you had like C, D, E, F, G. It would actually echo out one by one all the encrypted volumes. So I'd have the volume key for any volumes on the device. So you can format this how you want, and the custom fields will basically reflect whatever you spit out from that script. And you can have a choice here, the replace line feed characters with a space. So maybe I want, if something would have multiple results, maybe I want it all on one line, so I could just make it wide to see, or maybe I want carriage returns. It's all your preference about how you want to look at it when reporting in the console, right? So when you look at this PowerShell, one thing that's not apparent, and I didn't get this either at first when I first started working with PowerShell in FileWave, is that this is all running through the 32-bit version of PowerShell because our client is running in 32-bit on Windows. And if you mostly manage Macs, you might not think about that on Windows, because Windows is a little bit different in that you really have to think about whether something's running in 32-bit or 64-bit, because there's 2 separate parts of the registry. There's certain commands that do not work in the 32-bit version of PowerShell, but there are some tricks to run your command in the 64-bit if you need to. And I actually have a field here that uses one of those tricks that's found in the knowledge base to basically, my script here is this one line and just comes back as a true if it's 64-bit. And basically this will test, am I on a 64-bit machine? Am I running in 32-bit? If I am, then it'll use the sysnative method to kind of switch over to the 64-bit PowerShell. Really, the intent is to switch to the native one. Since there's only 32-bit and 64-bit Windows, this makes the most sense to switch to the 64-bit. And so this script will say true when this runs, and it kind of proves that it's running in 64-bit. So when I go here in the console, these trues are because they're running with my wrapper. And that's found in the knowledge base. So, when you're making a field, that whole 64-bit versus 32-bit is important, and I want to show you a little bit with, how I start off when I make a script. So I might start off making this BitLocker script, right? And I'm in the PowerShell ISE x86, which is the 32-bit one. When you click here and you type PowerShell with 1W, you'll see that there's PowerShell and then there's PowerShell x86. So I'm on a 64-bit machine. So this is the 64-bit one and this is the 32, right? And if you're on a 32-bit machine, there's only one version of PowerShell. So I'm in the 32-bit one because I know that's what FileWave is going to use. So when I go to run this, you're going to see that I'm going to encounter what you're probably going to encounter when you first go to do a PowerShell script on Windows. You're going to get this red text and it's going to say running scripts is disabled because Windows has that disabled by default. So it's really easy. There's this set execution policy where you can make it so that, things are allowed to run. So I have this unrestricted setting, and I'm going to click this smaller play button that's just going to run the highlighted text. So now PowerShell can run. And if I then run the script, you'll see it comes back with the volume key for my virtual machine's encrypted drive. So I know that that works, right? So an example where this wouldn't work is, let's say I want to get the administrators on a machine. And again, I'm going to run just that line of code. You can see this does not work because it really needs to be running with the 64-bit PowerShell. So that's where there's this other trick that's in the knowledge base in the articles about custom fields, where I can run just this line, and then you'll see, because it's using sysnative, it's running the 64-bit PowerShell, and it's doing that command with that, and then you get this output. And when you get output like this in PowerShell, you can do things like you can format this as a table or a list. You can get rid of the header. There's all sorts of nifty ways that you can format this to be how you want in the custom field. It just takes a little bit of figuring out, and when you have it looking nice here, you can then take your script and then put it into a custom field. That other example that was in the FileWave client that I showed off was this. It's in the knowledge base. You can just put your script here where it says uncomment the next line to prove you're always in 64-bit. You can put your script here instead of this line, and everything will run in 64-bit PowerShell. It's kind of an easy way to just kind of insert a whole script. This method is an easy way to do kind of a single line of code. Okay. And another command that could be helpful is if you're not sure what your execution policy is, which is whether you can run things, you can do get execution policy. The nice thing about this editor is you'll see it has all the commands PowerShell has. When you're typing a command, it'll kind of have a type ahead. You can find out all the switches that might be supported. It really is an easy way to put together a script. Okay, so any questions so far?
Just one about what you just answered. So as far as how to run the 64-bit stuff, there were a couple questions about that. And it looks good so far.
Okay, so then you might wonder, when do these scripts run, right? Is this gonna run every week or just once? So these things are evaluated once per day. They're also evaluated when you do a verify against the client. Verifies against clients might be problematic right now because devices might be NATed away from you. But in 14.5 that Tony was talking about earlier, you can do a verify through the web admin with a NATed device. So you could cause a custom field to update. It'll also happen on service start. So if a device reboots, it'll update its field. The nice thing with the BitLocker example is if the device no longer has its volume key for some reason and it won't boot up and it's prompting for the volume key, you know, whatever's in here will be valid as of the last time that that machine was running and checking in. So this shouldn't really get wiped out by anything. About the only way it could get wiped out is if somebody actually formatted the machine, put an agent on, you know, and then it inventoried in, but by that point, this volume key is no longer relevant because you formatted the machine. So maybe this trick will be a nice thing to have BitLocker keys. Okay, let's see, we talked about that. Also, and this got me today, working on a customer script, was, you know, is the script running as a particular user? It's actually running as the system. So I think I had an example. No, I didn't have it in here, but I had an example of a script that I was trying to do where I wanted to run the script the same way that FileWave does as system. And if anyone's heard of PS Tools from Microsoft, it was originally from another company, but if you Google, you know, PS Tools, Microsoft, you can download them, and it includes a tool called PS Exec. And PS Exec would let you run something as any other user. So you could run something as system. And so the trick I did when I was working on this customer script was I ran actually the PowerShell interpreter as system. And so that way I could try the script exactly as it might run from FileWave. So that's, you know, can be a thing. In the end, we actually found that that particular script was only removing some software for one user, the current user you were running it as, where we just had to add a switch and then it would delete the software from all users. It was just the -all user. So sometimes when you're working with PowerShell, it's important to all the switches that are part of that thing, because that can be the difference between it working the way you expect and not. So when I ran it in the PowerShell environment, it was removing that software, but it was removing it as me because I was running it in the PowerShell ISE. And so I saw Solitaire disappear. But when I ran it through FileWave, it looked like it ran, but Solitaire didn't go away for me. And that's just because it was running for me versus running as the system account. I hope that made sense. Let's see, and so I showed off the BitLocker example. The display model example, I also have in the knowledge base, for what monitors attached. I have some improvements to this script, so I'll be posting a little update. I know in the knowledge base, for instance, if you look for custom fields, right? So when you go to the knowledge base, there's all these tags here. And I've been doing some work, and I'm going to continue to do some work to make sure the tags are right. In some cases, there might have been, for this iOS 12, there might have been an iOS tag and a 12 tag. And so there were a bunch of articles just tagged as 12, which wasn't really meaningful. But I'm trying to maybe clean up articles to give them proper fields. And I think you'll find that the custom fields tag will get a few more examples shortly. So you could come back to our knowledge base and look for that. And if you had any interesting ones to share, it might be interesting if you shared them with us. If you don't figure out, kind of how to share it with somebody, I suppose a support case might be easy if you didn't know how to reach me or the team. But it would be nice to have contributions from the community to this area. And we test it before we posted it, made sure it worked, and clean up any glitches in it. So I think that, I think on the custom field topic, I think that covers everything I wanted to specifically talk about. I mean, there's other ways that you could take this. You could make smart groups based on this data so that as the field changes, it moves from smart group to smart group, and since file sets, or as we call them, payloads in the web admin, as their smart group changes, maybe what they get assigned to them changes. So you can do a lot of intelligent things leveraging the scripting. So any other questions or?
Nope, we're good to go.
Okay. Tony, you've been here a lot longer than me. I've been here a whole month, everybody. But is there anything you think that I left out around custom fields?
No, not really. Just one thing to note on the script-based ones, like with the BitLocker key, where that data is so important, you do have to be careful not to overwrite it manually, because you can. Even though they're based on scripts, you can actually enter a manual value in them. So you do want to be a little bit careful of that. But no, that was really good content, Josh.
Okay. So then if nobody has anything else, I could move on to the second portion of this.
Oh, just one last thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this doesn't get used very often, but with the environment variables, you can actually perform operations between multiple custom fields, right? And compare values, or add them together and output it in a third custom field. So that's a really cool feature that's probably underutilized just because customers aren't aware that it's there. So if you click execution environment here, and then environment variables, you can set up environment variables for virtually all of the information items within FileWave, including other custom fields. And that allows you to access the data from other custom fields within this one. So it allows you to do all sorts of mathematical and comparison actions on them within a third script, or within a third custom field.
Yeah, that's a good catch. I didn't touch on that, so really good. Okay, so then I'm going to talk about single sign-on in Octa. So here, let's cancel out of here. Discard changes. Okay, so single sign-on with Octa and Azure, but I'm going to focus on Octa for this one, just to keep it simple and on our schedule. So when using FileWave Admin, right, you normally sign in with a user that is defined, right in the server. You can set up multiple users, but there's a lot of benefit to using an identity provider like Octa. So one of the benefits is centralized user administration, right? So if you're in a large organization or even a smaller one, if you use, let's say, Octa or Azure for all of your authentication, then you don't have to remember so many passwords. When someone leaves the organization, you can turn off their account in one place and you kind of block them in multiple places, right? So it simplifies the offboarding process. Or if somebody's just on leave of absence and you want to stop them from logging into things. It also adds the capability to do multi-factor authentication. And that's perhaps the biggest thing, because now to sign into FileWave, I would need to have, in the case of Octa, there's an app on my phone that I'm going to use, so that when I sign in, you're going to see that I have to enter that code to get in, which adds an additional layer of protection. And in the content for the Alliance meeting training, I tagged the FileWave Identity Provider article. There's a few articles. It will walk you through step-by-step with setting this up. I'm going to more explain how I set this up without actually setting up each step. But I did this all by following the article. I did it last week, so I know that everything in the case of Octa is 100% in line with the article. So I want to just show you, this is my Octa kind of evaluation console, right? I have one user, just myself. I created a couple of groups. But within Octa, there are things called applications, right? So I have the FileWave application that I added, right? And an application has a few fields. So it has a client ID, a client secret, a domain, and there's a fourth piece to this, which is under API within security. And there's sort of this API token that I generated. So now this setup, about the only confusing part is that you use both the web admin to set it up and the native client. And this is kind of part of things kind of moving, transitioning over to the web. So here's my lab portal, and I'm just going to log in locally at first. There we go. Right. And so there's this gear up at the top, and identity provider is here. And so I'm going to hit edit here so that you can look at my configuration screen. And you're going to see those four things I just talked about: client ID, client secret, API token, and domain, right? And over here, when you're setting up Octa on the other tab, there's also these 3 URLs that you use as part of that setup. So for the initial setup, you mostly just need this page, and you need to be over in Octa creating the application. Then you can choose whether you want to use this for admin, enrollment, or both. For the time being, we're just going to talk about using it for admin. Enrollment is kind of interesting so that when somebody joins it to FileWave, they can actually use their Octa credentials to do so. But let's talk about admin, right? Because that's the topic for today. So I have this enabled for admin. I have, you'll see this value ending in E5D6, and you'll see if I go back to applications, you'll see E5D6. This is the same application. On the Octa side, you have to say who can use this application. But on the FileWave side, you also have to determine if someone comes through from Octa, what rights are they going to have? So here on the admin, I set up, that the connection is possible, but there's nothing here to say, well, if Josh logs in through Octa, what role is he going to have, right? So that other part is done over here. If I go to Assistance, and then I go to Manage Administrators, you can see that I have an Octa entry. And I went pretty simply. I have the Everyone group, but more likely you would not do what I did, but you would hit this plus and you would hit IDP group, and you can see I get another one, and I'm going to say example, since I have a 5-year-old, all I hear is Five Nights at Freddy's. So this is in my head, FNAF. But I'm going to say, let's say I want this to apply to this group. This list came from Octa, right? So if I go over to Octa, let me hit OK to just get rid of that dialog. If I go over to Octa, there's a groups concept, right? And you can see these same groups. These, once you have the connection to FileWave, you will see these groups and you can select them, just like I did. So if somebody was in this group, they will get whatever permissions you grant. And if your intention is to make something where they can do literally everything, there is at the bottom a select all. Or even if you're going to have them do most things, it might be easiest to select all and then deselect the couple of things you don't want them to be able to do. So you can easily say, if somebody's in this group, they get X permissions when they sign in. Once you set up this piece and define how your groups are going to map for permissions, then it becomes really easy. Then somebody can sign in to both the native client and the web admin. So I'm going to show you that I'm going to sign out. And now that I have Octa configured, I have login with Octa. This login screen is an Octa page. So if I pick to sign in, you can see now I have to go on my phone. And there's a little, I'll show it in the video, there's a little app with a number on it. And it changed as I was typing. And now I've very simply made it so that multi-factor authentication is needed to get to the web admin. And if I quit out of this and relaunch the native, you can see there's a login with IDP. It will bring this up. An interesting glitch that another customer reported is once this comes up, there's no way to kind of cancel out of it. But that's something that I'm sure we'll address. But in most cases, you're not going to cancel out. You're going to want to log in. And if I want to log in, everything kind of works perfectly. So now I need my password. And then you'll see that it wants, again, the Octa Verify app. I'm going to put in the new number. You know, and these numbers, they change about once a minute. They're called a one-time password, right? Because you can use it once and then it goes away. It makes it incredibly secure. Even if somebody had your password, they couldn't get into the console because they couldn't replay the login because the password was already used. And also after a minute, the next password's in effect anyway. So you can see I'm now signed into the console as my Octa user with whatever permissions I've defined. And so that is for the most part, you can see it's pretty simple to set up. And I did this. You can see I have a trial account with Octa. I set up a free trial account. You know, I didn't even have a lab environment when I started to set this up. And I was able to set this integration up and set up multi-factor authentication without ever spending a dime at Octa. So if you wanted to try this out and you didn't use Azure or Octa, you could easily set up Octa to kind of prove out the value. So any questions there?
No, none that we haven't fielded in the chat. Although I do want to take the helm for just a second before you transition over to Bao on the other topic, because I knew there was something I forgot earlier that I wanted to show that was in 14.4 that I think people are going to like, and I totally forgot about it.
Okay. Do you need to share your screen for it, or is it something where?
I do.
Okay. So then I will.
Ever so briefly.
I will stop sharing.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and share my screen for just a moment. And this is something that PN and the team really worked on very hard. And so I want to make sure, although I don't know what the deal is with this weird icon, I just kind of took a screenshot of that. But this is in 14.5, but technically released in 14.4. Something I forgot to mention with regard to boosters. If you have one, kind of no big deal. But if you have 50, that you have now these two buttons where you can upgrade either an individual booster or upgrade all boosters. In my case, one or all is still one, so not a great example on that front, but you can then automatically do an upgrade. So the server will pull down from CDN the correct version of the booster for these boosters, and that's applicable to Mac, Linux, and Windows boosters.
And there was some detail about that. You had to get to a certain version before you could do the next.
Chicken and the egg scenario. You can't update them. So for instance, when I first set this up, I added a 14.2 booster. But 14.2 boosters don't know about automatic updates. So they can't be automatically updated. So you have to get to a version that supports automatic updates before you can use automatic updates. So technically 14.4 supports it, but you probably won't be able to use it until you go to 14.5, because that's the first time there'll be a release that your boosters will know. So anyway, I said I was going to cover this earlier and then totally forgot when I got in the heat of battle there. So I did want to mention this one. But hopefully that'll be welcome to those of you who manage a lot of boosters, because this should really save you some time.
Nice.
All right. And it's back over to you fine gentlemen.
Okay, so then Bao, are you ready?
Yep. Let me start the screen sharing here. Okay, can you all see my screen now? Showing up okay?
Yes.
Okay,
it's in
great.
it's not in the oh yeah, you're about to do the presentation mode.
Okay, there we go.
Perfect.
All right. Well, I hope everyone's been enjoying this year's Alliance meeting so far. But I'm going to talk about the kiosk, its benefits, and how to customize it. So let's just get right into that. This is going to be a shorter presentation, so maybe we'll have some extra time at the end for Q&A. Now, a lot of client management is sort of a delicate balance between security and enabling your end users. But the more you lock down their devices, the more you're going to have to manage them to service your customers' needs. So for example, most environments, you're not going to give your users admin rights on their own devices, and that's for good reason. Malware is everywhere these days, and you probably don't want to spend the majority of your time cleaning up after malware infestations. So the number one reason why users usually want admin access to their machines is to actually install apps when it's convenient for them, and not necessarily when the IT department wants to deploy those particular apps. If you take away this ability from your users, that means you now have to manage those application installs for them. Now, it's not a big deal if they're smaller apps that don't require a lot of resources for deployment, like they're not huge applications like Adobe applications, but there might be other apps that require reboots. So in a lot of those cases, you have to schedule those installs for a convenient time where you're not disturbing end users during their work hours or school hours. If only there was a way to compromise and sort of satisfy both sides of this coin. So not giving users admin access, but also allow them to install software at their convenience. And that's what the kiosk was meant to solve, that particular problem. So why use the kiosk? Well, for me, it's because freedom for everybody. That means for both end users and IT admins. So for standard users, that means being able to install and uninstall apps whenever they want to, when it's convenient for them on their schedule. And for IT admins, it frees you up to spend your time on other things, other tasks besides software deployments. Now, of course, you want to restrict users in what they can actually install particular apps and not just necessarily anything they want. Now, they're not going to need admin access because, as mentioned previously, the FileWave client runs installers under the root or system account user context. So any user can perform an app installation that you've assigned to them via a file set. The instant gratification is going to greatly impact your customer satisfaction. I think most end users prefer to help themselves instead of having to file a help desk ticket all the time to get an app installed. But this is going to further reduce IT support requests. You can even post maintenance scripts that would normally require, small little things to fix small common items, recurring issues that require admin access. The users can now run that by themselves multiple times. They can simply uninstall and reinstall that file set that's got that script in it to fix their issues. So my question is, why manage software distributions when you can let your users manage them for you instead? Work smarter and not harder necessarily. So now that we've decided to sort of take advantage of the kiosk, we need to decide, do you want to customize it or not? Not doing anything is probably the path of least resistance, but that's sort of boring. Wouldn't you want to brand your kiosk with your company or organization logo? That's a good start. And that sort of improves your user's comfort level and their user experience with the kiosk. If it's got, if the title bar for the kiosk doesn't say FileWave Kiosk, but it's got your company name in it, for example, right? And the company logo is in the background in the kiosk UI. That, and it just looks more professional. I mean, who doesn't appreciate a professional? There's different levels of customization available depending on the amount of effort you want to put in. I've sort of arbitrarily broken it down into 4 levels. And as you sort of progress further down in the levels of customization, you need to put in a little bit of extra effort above the, beyond the level above that. So levels 2 through 4 in blue, because they all require deployment of items to a custom folder on client devices. Don't worry, it's pretty easy to test out these customizations, and I'll show that to you a little bit later towards the end of the presentation, where I'll do it to a live device. But in this screenshot here, you can see the effects of some of the customizations. So throughout this presentation, what I'm going to do is progressively walk you through screenshots. Every time we make a change, it's going to show a screenshot with that change in effect. And so those changes will be additive, and you'll see that in the screenshots. So level 1 is pretty basic. Any admin can do this. It's basically logging to the FileWave admin and making changes to the kiosk tab in your admin prefs. This will let you replace all of the icons for the categories. You can create additional application categories in there and nest them and those kinds of things. So those changes are actually stored on the server, so there's nothing to deploy to the client devices. Level 2 involves a really small INI file that allows you to change the organization name, disable the top downloads list, and to force the icon in the system tray or the Apple menu, so it's always present on a client device, regardless of whether you have a kiosk association or not. And then a little bit higher than that at level 3, that involves adding custom graphics, usually transparent ping files, and that's going to replace a lot of the UI elements to your liking. Maybe you want colors to match the color scheme of your organization. And then level 4, this involves modifying some style sheets to change the text color, background color, and buttons and things like that in the actual kiosk UI itself. So let's take a look at the level 1 customizations here. As mentioned before, they're actually saved to the server, and you can change them in the kiosk tab of the admin prefs. But this is what the default looks like in the kiosk tab. And then these are essentially, I've replaced them with custom versions. And you can see I've chosen blue because I happen to like blue. I think it's more relaxing on the eyes than black. But you can put in whatever you want in here as long as they're PNGs and they fit within a square. Now, the next, oh, this is what it actually looks like in effect in the kiosk itself. So this is what the default looks like. And then you'll notice here on the upper left here in the second screenshot, there's where the custom icons actually take effect. So let's go ahead and move on to level 2 here. The settings INI, this is a custom configuration file that you can add to that custom folder to do those 3 things that I mentioned before: renaming the kiosk window title to add your company name, hiding the top downloads, and forcing the Apple menu bar or system tray icon to be just on at all times. You actually don't have to have all 3 of them in here. You can leave out any ones that you don't want to use. For example, you might just have a single line that says, that changes the window title, and ignore the other 2 lines and not even put them in the file. That's fine also. And let's take a look at what this looks like in action. So here you can see we've got the default here of what it looks like without a settings INI in place, but I've already replaced my icons on the server there. But there you go. I've changed the title to Acme Widget Company and Software Library, right? And then I've gotten rid of the top downloads. The next level up here is going to be level 3, where you can add your own graphics and icons to the custom folder to actually replace some of them. And you can see some of the pictures here in the examples here, the nav arrows, the watermark itself, which is the giant FileWave logo on the lower left. That's sort of a little bit dim because it's a watermark. The rating stars, I don't know why anyone would want to replace those, but maybe you like them in a different color. I've just done an example, which you'll see here in subsequent screenshots here. I've just replaced all the stars with thumbs ups instead, just for the heck of it. And then you can actually replace the system tray icon or the Apple menu icon. Now, it says system tray here, but it actually works on the Mac too. We just had to name it something, so we called it tray icon. So this is what it looks like after our subsequent changes, before we've actually replaced a lot of those graphics. You can see we've got the star ratings there, the default FileWave watermark graphic there, and of course the menu bar icon there, the Apple menu bar icon. Now, I didn't choose to customize the tray icon because I didn't do that. It just uses the same watermark, the same watermark graphic for the icon there in the Apple menu bar. And you can see I've circled the nav arrows there, and of course the ratings for the apps themselves. And the highest level of customization that you might want to do involves basically just editing this QSS style sheet here. And again, this goes inside of that custom folder. It's pretty straightforward. These are the locations where it actually goes on the client device. I apologize for not showing these locations before, but I just didn't have a good spot in the slides, the previous slides, to mention it. So it ended up in this slide. But it's pretty straightforward. If you take a look at it, you can change, you can see some of the pixel widths here for the borders for various things, like buttons and stuff like that. And you can change the colors also. When you put all of these items together, this is what it looks like for a client device. You can create a file set to deploy the custom folder to client devices. And these things take effect when a user logs in. So when you're playing around with this on a single client, you're going to need to log out and log back in to see the changes. In terms of what that looks like in when it's actually being enforced, you can see there on the screenshot on the right there, I've changed the background highlighting color for selecting items there in the nav menu and the categories. The background color is actually changed on the right-hand pane also. And then the changes here a little bit more drastic for the actual individual application entries. When I select one, I've changed the background of both panes here to something completely different than what they were originally. And then you'll notice that the install or uninstall button, I've also changed that, as well as the text color there. Now, I included these just because I didn't want any of you to think I'm a Windows hater. This is what it looks like on the Windows side with all of the changes, exact same changes in place. So it's very similar. The only thing that you can't see is the icon because, well, Windows likes to hide the icons now in the system tray, but trust me, it's down there. So let me get out of here and show you what it looks like in practice.
There was one question, Bao, if you could.
Oh, sure.
How do you change the background on the left side of the menu on the initial splash page where the background image is? I think that was the one that you showed where that was also the icon from the menu bar, right?
So which slide was that?
They said yes. So you know the one where it was like that square, that colorful square? Perhaps it was 2 slides up, like 10. Yes, that slide. How did you customize that?
You mean the 2 icons here, this icon versus this icon?
Yeah, that's what they were asking.
Yeah, so there's actually 2 graphics here. So there's tray icon versus background icon. If you don't specify tray icon, what ends up happening is it uses background icon in place of tray icon also.
And they say they want the background behind the background icon.
The background.
It's in the folder named background icon PNG for Mac.
So I'm not quite, so they're just talking about the color?
Not an icon, it's a color, yes.
Yeah. So that's in the fwgui.qss style sheet.
So that would be a style sheet setting to change that.
That's a style sheet setting to change the background colors, yeah.
And they said where?
I don't know exactly. I don't remember specifically. I'd have to play around with that again, go check what I did before to actually let you know.
Okay, so we could follow up on that. And the question.
Do you have a screenshot of the one that we got a copy of that was that was shared with us? Or are you showing that?
Yeah, so let's actually just hop right into it. It's actually on this machine right here. I was just going to show you live how to actually test this. And I don't quite remember where it is in here. Let's go take a look here.
And the slide deck, we could probably attach it to the KB article that talks about customizing this that I have tagged with FileWave Alliance training. Maybe we could just attach it to the article after this.
Yeah. So we could probably just include this in there. I don't remember where it is in here actually, which one it was. You know, when you spend too long staring at something, you sort of forget where everything is. But yeah, so what we can do is just give out this customization if anyone wants to try it, because it's pretty generic. And so you can play around with it. It's probably one of these right here. So this is file set list view. So that's for the right-hand side. I'm guessing the other one.
Bao, what are you using for that virtual machine?
Oh, this ESXi. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that this is the tag that you're looking for right here, the background color right there. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. So give that a shot. So I'm just going to quickly go through here and show you what it's like. I'm actually going to go backwards here a little. Here in this case, you can see there, I've actually taken advantage of tray icon here. I've replaced, I was a little bit lazy in that I didn't bother looking for an icon. I basically just copied one of the existing icons here and renamed it tray icon.ping to get this icon up here. So you can see that, it's different. So this is the background icon, and this is tray icon. They're separate now in this particular instance. Before, I didn't bother doing that, so the books showed up in here also. So this is what it looks like now with everything in place. I'm going to start removing items so you can see how easy it is to test. As long as you have the custom folder on the client machine, just start renaming them from the default names here, and you can see that things will start to, my customizations will start to disappear here. So I'm going to get rid of the style sheet here. I'm also going to get rid of the settings.ini because those changes are pretty obvious there. Let's go back, just take a look here. You know what? It's upset because I changed these items in here. So let's go ahead and log out and log back in, and you'll see that the Windows title will go back to just FileWave Kiosk, and that my color changes will be completely gone. So let's log out here. And you can certainly do the same thing with the other graphics also. If I rename those and just prefix them with some character, you'll notice that those changes will disappear also. If I can get my password correct here. There we go. And we'll wait a little bit here for the kiosk icon to show up here. There we go. And you'll notice that the title bar is back to normal, and my background colors are back to normal, as well as the top downloads are back also. So it's that easy. Make your change, log out and log back in, and you should see those take effect. So pretty straightforward. And let's just go ahead and recap really quickly here. So why use the kiosk? Well, freedom. It's going to free up your time. It's going to free up your end user's time. So less work for both of you. They don't have to file support requests for software, and you don't have to actually, schedule a time to install the applications on their machines either. Now, why customize the kiosk? Well, it gives them the warm fuzzies. It's got your corporate logo, it's got your company name in the title bar, so that always looks nice and it looks much more professional. And you've just seen how easy it is for me to actually customize the kiosk and to actually test it. It's just a matter of throwing a lot of those files inside of the custom folder and logging in and logging out, right? So you can put in as little or as much effort as you want. It just depends on your needs there, and there's a little bit of something for everybody.
I was going to mention, I think, Bao, that there's a way, I'd have to look for it, but there's a way to force it to reload without the log in, log off, or log off, log on. I'll find it.
That would be really cool and convenient. Yeah, I just know that FW GUI and the kiosk launches as part of login, so that's just what I've been doing.
And there was a question. There's no way to eliminate the uninstall button after an installation happens, right?
There is, yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the uninstall button doesn't really do anything if the file set doesn't actually uninstall. So, for that really only affects your custom file sets or app drops. It doesn't really affect Windows installers because unless you check that checkbox for an MSI or you added a post uninstallation script to roll back the install, like it shouldn't really do anything, even though it says uninstall.
And there's no way to have like a reinstall button if something could potentially get reinstalled.
Well, if you uninstall,
like over it's I guess you could pick uninstall and then pick install again.
That's the thing that we have in the portal there for consideration. It's kind of those one-off scripts where you just want to run it occasionally, but
right. Okay.
And it's in the chat there how you can kill and relaunch the FWB GUI.
Awesome.
On the Mac side. But the changes are relatively the same between the two when you make those changes. And I was saying there before in the chat that it's you can't really do any harm with the kiosk stuff. Play with it, right? It's fun just to change things. Now, I do know that when you get to the very, very granular level, though, there's a couple of things that aren't actually in the QSS to be able to change. But otherwise, you can just play with stuff. You can take things away. You can change values and just see what happens. Because you can always just remove the customization files and you're back to normal.
I think that got all the questions. If anybody had any questions about any of the sessions that they want to get in, we have
or in general, because I think we're to the point of the day everybody's supposed to have virtual cocktails or something, which doesn't sound nearly as much fun as actual cocktails. So I'm not sure how that goes, but
yeah, in 15 minutes was the so this would flow kind of right into the digital AMA happy hour.
Yeah, I would think so. If folks want to ask any questions on any topics, we're more than happy to do that. Yeah, Azure is very similar to Octa and also in the knowledge base. And it's very similar. Each of these solutions end up the same thing. In fact, the Azure setup for MDM is very similar too, where you're creating an app in the portal and then you're assigning rights to the app for the FileWave server to talk to the app, and then you give rights to the users who are going to use that app. And so it's lots of steps in each of them, but they're one-time only steps.
Yeah, and the KB articles are very helpful. I just walked through it in the case of Octa, and it was just step by step, very easy. So let's see, there are some questions like, can we get the ability to cut and copy from any data, please? An example is I can't copy the date from the DEP associations menu.
Yeah, that one,
do you know that, Tony?
I'd have to look at that one. I saw a question there about a specific Dell model. That one, I don't know anything about that one. Derek may be able to add, but it sounds like that one might be a specific one. It's very hard for us in some of the hardware to be able to replicate since we don't have the hardware in our hands.
It possibly relates to the pass-through MAC address that comes up, because that would impact what MAC address the imaging server sees. So, but that would probably be good through support.
Maybe at this point, Jonathan, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea that we just allow people to talk, given that it's a digital happy hour and all that. And folks could just ask questions. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I will, sorry.
Just don't let Jonathan talk.
Jonathan was, he was looking into a mirror as he was sharing his screen. Okay, I think Jonathan mentioned there that folks should be able to unmute themselves. Who has the floor? Let's start with a non-FileWave related question. If you're starting a digital happy hour, what's your drink of choice?
Unless they can't unmute themselves.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, wait.
Beer, macchiato. I think.
Tony, are we starting a happy hour or are we diving right on in?
I think we want to start that. I started a while back, right before I presented earlier today. I had just had a liquid lunch. But it was just 3 martinis, so no big deal.
Just a little to take the edge off, right?
Yep. Well, breakfast only lasts you so long.
A Bloody Mary only goes so far.
It sure does.
Yeah, I'm boring. I can't ever drink because there might be a forest fire here, since I'm a fireman.
So
I never get to.
So the question there about the Windows license. Oh, that's a good point, Jeff. The question on the license for Windows, what was that for? For normal imaging, or were you talking about using autopilot?
Oh, I think that goes back to that discussion about being able to use MDM to kind of reset a machine back to clean so that you could then reissue it.
Well, technically, you don't need any license to do that. Just to clarify, if you want to knock a machine that's currently, if you don't care about any data on it and you want to kick it back to the out of box experience, you can actually do it through PowerShell, and we'll be giving you a PowerShell when we release this for doing that, so you can kind of handle that on your own. So that doesn't cost anything to do it, but having it automatically do something after that is the part where the licenses are required. So to be able to hook into autopilot is the big thing, and autopilot, like I said before, is like DEP. So you have to have Azure AD Premium support, and I think it's a flavor that includes Intune, but you need to have a PhD to understand Microsoft licensing, so I really can't answer that one specifically. Mm-hmm. Yes, so the backup before upgrade is just a standard part of FileWave now. That said, I do want to clarify, make sure you're backing up independently, and if you're backing up, you don't really want to back up things in motion, so always good if you can have a downtime to shut FileWave down, take a backup of the database. It doesn't include things in a moving state. That's always best. Yes, there is some updated API documentation. In fact, I can show you a little bit. Well, I can point you at least to a knowledge base article that is the newer API for the web admin that you can do a lot more with. So let me grab that for you and I'll paste it here in the chat.
Hey, this is John again. We're also looking, if you are interested in exploring the API, we're looking at trying to get a group of people to kind of bounce their off of each other. So you can send us feedback if that's something you guys would be interested in. I know it's kind of a very specific thing, but there might be some of you I know that are very interested in that.
Well, as far as the question on the scripting, that all depends on what your backup solution is. But you could certainly set a cron job to shut FileWave down for 30 minutes and then start it back up or something like that if you wanted to. The key point, I guess, is the frequency of those, and you don't want to be in a situation. And it is important too. There's a couple of things that when we've had incidences where folks have had trouble with a backup or have lost an environment, it's usually been related to what can be the database, but a lot of times it ends up being a problem with the storage for the file sets themselves, for the payloads. That maybe those have gotten symlinked somewhere, and then you have some kind of drive problem, and you lose them. So you need both pieces, the database and the data, because you don't want to rebuild file sets. And that is no fun. So there's a question on best procedures going forward with Mac OS software updates. Just let the clients auto update. You can do that. The newer method, I think, needs a little time to mature. PN, I didn't know if you're in a position to give your opinion on it, but it's new with the MDM deployment of those patches, and I don't think it's been as smooth from Apple's perspective as they would have liked it to have been. So I think we'll see that probably mature here over the next 6 months or so, and maybe get a lot more stable, and then I think we could have a better answer for that.
So over the time we had macOS updates driven by ourselves, so the FileWave client running on the Mac. We were using software update command line tool, which was kind of supported by Apple, but not always. And I think started macOS 10.13, we started to see that, yeah, software update would be deprecated. And they made it for macOS 11. So starting with macOS 11, we now use the MDM portion of software update, which is supposed to be more reliable. And anyway, on macOS Big Sur, there is no other way to update Mac. But we have way less control over how it works. In the past, before Apple broke software update command, we would be able to define when we download the file set, the update, when we install the update, when we reboot. Now, the only thing we can do is ask the OS to do something. So download the update, install the update. And most of the time, the answer will be, okay, I got your request and I will do it whenever I want. So mixed feeling there, because it's supposed to be more reliable, but on the other hand, we have way less control over how it works, and we cannot let you decide when it happens. But anyway, I mean, there is no other option. We have to go that path, starting with macOS 11. There is no other way to do it. So one thing Apple is bringing with the different version of macOS, I think they started with 11.3. There are new restrictions which allows you to define more granular time window for which the update will not show up for the end user. So the very first iteration from Apple was only one time window, up to 90 days, for which the update will not show up in the preferences. But that was it. Now you have three options. One is for major updates, one for minor updates, and one for non-system updates. And you will be able to configure that with FileWave, so to define a different time window. But at the end of this time window, the end user will be presented the update and they will be able to update themselves. So there is no way we can work around that. Automatic, yes. Apple doesn't want us to let their devices unpatched and unupdated. So yeah, we will have to. I think at the end, the best way is to let end user update themselves and use just this time window to make sure that you can test on your site if the update is not breaking your system, and then have social means to tell end users to not update if there is something really broken. But if you don't have this time window, and if something is broken and you don't have a fix before the end of the time window, there is nothing you will be able to do. I'm seeing a question about M1 Max. A few things. So we are working on providing an M1 native version of FileWave. We will have client, booster, admin in short future. Server, it will take longer because we are using third-party components which are not available on natively on ARM or M1. It will come. We know that they are working on it, but it's not there yet. One thing is that we are already compatible. Apple provides on M1 devices Rosetta 2, which is a translator tool. So it's half recompiling. So it's their own tool to have Intel-based devices running on M1 devices, Intel-based applications, running on M1 devices. The only trick is that even if the very first test device we had when they started M1 chips had Rosetta pre-installed, it's not the case with brand new M1 devices you will get from the store. So if you want to go there with M1, the recommendation we have is that hopefully you will have DEP devices, which should be more or less the case for all of you in the US. In Europe, we have still a few countries where we don't have DEP, but usually in the US or America, it should be mostly the case. And if you are using our custom PKG, we made a trick where if you download a custom PKG and if we detect that Rosetta 2 is not installed, what we do is that we will just download everything, copy everything, ask Apple to install Rosetta 2, and then reinstall FileWave client. Of course, we cannot do that at the same time because there are some limitations. You cannot install Rosetta 2 at the same time we trigger the installation of FileWave client. It would have been too easy, but we found that workaround. So most of the time it works. Sometimes there is some race condition, but we've seen that most of the time it works. So FileWave client will be deployed. We will first install Rosetta 2 and then it will be installed. And this will be solved as soon as we have an universal binary application that will be both Intel and M1. And yeah, I see there are some answers about how to deal with M1 specific apps. Yes, you have inventory queries, smart groups that can tell you if how to organize your setup to
you can also use requirements on the file sets. You can also use requirements on the file sets themselves, but I personally don't like that method much because then everything looks like an error, even though it wasn't really an error.
Yeah, the requirements was always I joined FileWave 9 years ago, so looks like to be a long time ago, and it was always a good question. What is a requirement failure? Is it a real failure because you missed the requirement, or is it a acceptable failure? And my understanding when I joined was that the idea was you can assign a file set to all your devices, and the requirements could be Mac or Windows. And then if the requirement is failed, it's just expected because you deployed something that should not be there, and that's what you wanted to do. That's maybe something we'll want to improve at some point. And we already have that with scripts. Our requirement scripts can exit a different code, which will tell you if this is an error or if this is, okay, I don't care about this, it's a known requirement failure. And this is something we would like to do as well. Make sure that you can define what does it mean, requirement failure, because we don't know, you know. And I'm saying how to identify M1. Another way is just custom custom field, if you have a good way to script that, you can just use the custom field and have it there. If the CPU type at some point changed, we used I don't know if you follow, but we were playing with the very first DTK, so developer kit Apple provided us 1 year ago. And of course, everything that was available on the developer kit, or not everything, but a couple of things that were in the development kit did not make it to the final version of M1 Max. And yeah, we could not rely on this one. So we may add more inputs in inventory in the future. Yeah, one way could be as well requirement scripts. I said, if I see that there is a question about kiosk, but if you have a requirement script that fails, the file set will not show up in the kiosk. So it's not like the file set will show up in the kiosk and your end user will install it and it will complain, hey, there is an error, I will not run. We run the requirement script, and only if the requirement script succeeds, we will show up the file set in the kiosk.
You can also, of course, script the behavior if you wanted to include both things in one file set and then do your own logic, which sounds painful, but you could kind of create that one time and then reuse that file set. That might be a way to go. You can also, and I don't know if you've used it, but you could technically use file set revisions for this too, and maybe come up with a way of assigning revisions, but you still have the same problem of perhaps having to have more than one group to assign them to. Lots of ways to skin the cat there, so to speak, but I don't think any of them are brilliant, which is probably why you're asking the question in the first place, Gino.
I think, yes, they need to be universal binaries now on the App Store, but it was more talking about the non-App Store apps, which is very likely the majority of the apps these days, even if the fact that now we can manage apps on macOS Big Sur, which was not the case before, will, I don't know if it will change the percentage of apps that will be in the App Store, but it makes App Store apps more usable from an MDM perspective on Mac.
There's a question there about the performance of the server running on Rosetta.
As I said, we don't have the same. That's one problem we have at FileWave, which is not just related to M1 question. Is that even if we gather all devices we have at FileWave, we will have less devices to test than everything mid-sized customer will have. So even if we have ways to trigger to fake devices and to simulate loads, yeah, at some point you will be the best to test that. And I know that's a stupid answer, but that's the reality. Now we've made some tests. We compared both devices with and without M1. And most of the time we see barely no difference between M1 devices and non-M1 devices on the server side. I mean, we haven't tried with high-end. I mean, M1s, they are still entry level these days. It's only 6-8 cores on 8 to 16 gigs of RAM, while usually if you go to an Intel device, you can go up to 32, if not more. If you have a very high-end, if you have very high-end Mac Pro, you can even have way more RAM. So we could not compare both. We don't have a Mac Pro to compare. We don't have a very high-end M1, but for the same type of devices, entry-level Mac Mini, the M1 behaves very good these days, even through Rosetta 2.
Color coding on the file set window in the admin. Boy, I hate that color. I hate the colors in the admin. You'd be hard pressed to convince me unless it would be driven from a value. If we could set a value to do it, but I don't like that you can't report on color. That's actually one of the things I really dislike with all the red within the admin, all the different reasons you have to then figure out why it's red. But I don't think that color one it's been real high on the list.
I think, I think color were already implemented before I joined FileWave, so look like last century when I'm saying that, and we never improved that over time. So that's probably something we want to do, or at least web admin making something nicer so you can organize your file sets in a better way. So yeah, I understand why you want to do that, but yeah, one by one, that's really not good. Seeing a question about custom fields and adding a new word. In theory, it should not change anything if you just change the list of possible choices for the custom field. You're not changing, or when we change the custom field, we don't delete and recreate the custom field. We just extend the current one. And new devices will get the information that there is a new value. So that should not do it. I would test it just to be sure, but yeah, if it's not working, send an email to Derek and Derek will contact me. No, support@filewave.com. So there is a question about native admin performance. Yes, we've seen that 14.1.2 had some performance issues there. I mean, we added inventory fields in the client view. We added different filtering to, because the view you are seeing in the client view in native admin is used in multiple places. It's used in inventory, it's used, not in inventory, sorry, in imaging, it's used in association view, it's used in VPP token view. So we are reusing the same view and we are just applying filters on top of it. And all the additions we made on top of the initial window slow down the window. And yeah, we've seen that if you have a lot of clones, you have a lot of slowness. So I would recommend first to, I mean, you can upgrade to 14.2, and I really hope that 14.2 is behaving better. We've seen a lot of improvements. We had a customer case where it was really awful, and we worked on that, and we made a lot of improvements there.
I think that's who you're talking. I think that's whose question you're answering, Pian.
Okay.
I think that's Ryan.
Yeah, okay, it's Ryan, because yeah, he's regarding performance issues could have a vast amount of clones. So yeah, we fixed. In theory, it should be fixed with 14.2, and we have a fix for 14.1, but we recommend going for 14.2. Does client group have a maximum size? Not that I know.
Sounds like a challenge. No. How big a one can you make?
Yeah, the only thing to keep in mind, there is a big difference between web admin and native admin there. Native admin has been built in a time where connections were not that good, and bandwidth was not that good. So the idea was, when you connect with native admin, we fetch everything and we just react to notifications. So if you have another admin, or if you're creating something, or if you have a client auto-enrolling, or if you have anything there, we will just get the notification. The nice thing with that is once all data are loaded, it's usually super fast, except this issue where we have the filtering, which slows everything down, but we don't go back to the server. If you do a search, it's local. We don't go back to the server. If you scroll, it's local. We don't go back to the server. So it's great because we don't add load on the server. You can have 10 admins scrolling down. Nothing will happen on the server. The bad thing is that if you have something super large, when you start, we have to fetch everything. And we have to deal with this very huge part. So the fetch everything takes some time. It delays the startup of the admin. And the fact that we have everything if we have coding issue like we had, it slows down the product. So that's the true drawback. Native web admin, it will go with modern applications where we have paging. So it just shows up our loads are what you see on screen plus minus a little bit. And when you scroll, we have to go back to the server and ask for the next page. If you search, we have to ask the server to search. So it's lightweight for the client. So it should behave a little bit faster, but then it has a little bit of load on the server side. So it's a trade-off, and you can use the one you need depending on your needs. There is best practice of installing profiles in Big Sur. I'm not sure what best practice in which sense. What I can describe, and maybe here the colleagues from professional services can help more about the best practices themselves, but I can just briefly go over how it works. Before, it's more or less the same that with software updates. Before with FileWave, you could install profiles via a command line, which is user bin profiles on any Mac, and it will install the profile with the agent. Same as for software update, we have control, we install, we have an error. If something failed, we just pass the error and we return the error. Starting, I think it was already macOS 10.9 or 10.10, you could start installing profiles via MDM, but we had profiles on FileWave client, so it was more reliable, we could do it. Now with macOS Big Sur, there is no way we can install profiles with profiles command line. The only thing you can do is read a profile, remove a profile, but not install a profile anymore. You need to have user interaction or MDM. You cannot do that with a script. So starting with macOS Big Sur, you have to install profiles via MDM. What we used to do in the past is that if your device was MDM enrolled, we would use MDM. And if your device was not MDM enrolled, we would use the command line. And we try to make sure that we keep consistency here. If you install a profile before you MDM enroll your device, we will keep using command line to update the profile. The reason is simple. If you want to move from command line to MDM, we have to remove the profile and then install it via MDM. You cannot overwrite it. If you try to do that, MDM will say, no, I can't. The profile has been installed outside MDM, I cannot do that. And if the profile you want to update is the network profile or a certificate profile you're using to connect to your network, that means that FileWave client will remove the profile and wait for MDM to install the profile, which will never happen because your device is not on the network anymore. So this is why we try to keep the profile installed by the initial way it has been installed, which is a problem if you upgrade to Big Sur, because if you upgrade to Big Sur, we cannot upgrade the profile anymore with the command line tool. So here I would say the best practice is if you know that you are going to Big Sur, MDM enroll your device first before upgrading to Big Sur and deploy your profiles before you MDM enroll your device. That's the best choice, because once you upgrade to Big Sur, we will not be able to upgrade any profile which has been installed via the command line. You will have to uninstall it manually and reinstall it afterwards. You can do that, but we don't want to do that for the reasons I just explained. No, there should be no difference at the end between macOS Big Sur or Catalina if your device is MDM enrolled in terms of profile.
One of the things that we've seen, I know PN has been with TCC profiles, and the order of delivery has been problematic, where we've had to build frameworks for making sure that this thing was there before you installed the profile, or the other way around. I can never keep that straight in my head, whether you need to deploy the app first or the profile first. But that ordering has been problematic, given that there's no, you can't do dependencies and things with the profiles or scripts with them.
Yeah, dependency for profile is definitely something we have on our list, and I would just recommend that just use the project board Tony mentioned earlier today to raise the priority if that's something you really need, because yeah, we know that we have to do it. We just need to get your input about the priority. Recent change about CentOS. Yeah, tell me about it. So the day we had something running properly on CentOS 8, the announce was that CentOS 8 was dead and it goes to CentOS Stream. So good timing. So for now, we reverted our changes to support CentOS 7, which buys us some time. I think the last update is that it's supported up to 2024. Now the idea we have, there are several options we have. You heard that we are going toward cloud for our infrastructure, so we still want to have on-prem hosted version of FileWave, but all the changes we are doing for the cloud may be something that we can reuse for even hosted. There is no reason that what we are using, I mean, it's at the end, it's Docker containers, it's Docker scripts. So that's something that could be used for the Linux environment. One other option, which could be a middle ground, would be that today we are providing one appliance with one big volume with everything on it. One idea we had was to provide you 2 volumes, one for the system and one for FileWave. We've tested that, but we still need to make sure that it's robust enough, because here the idea would be that at some point, if you want to change to another Linux distribution, we could simply get rid of the system volume and reuse the data volume, which contains everything FileWave. But we need to make sure that that works properly, because if we tell you, hey, this is how you should do, and then you do it, and then FileWave is down, or even worse, it's broken, so it breaks deployments, yeah, that would be just a disaster. But yeah, we know that we have this 2024 deadline, and we definitely don't want to let you do that just the last day. So yeah, we're on it. And maybe one thing we already started, I don't know if you've used, for those having used imaging, so our IVS system was running IVS 6 for a long time. Now the new one is running IVS 7. And you have 2 ways of migrating. One is the I'm lazy one and I have large bandwidth. I just killed IVS 6 and I just recreate an IVS 7 and I enroll it again, and everything will be downloaded again after some time. Or if you care about your bandwidth, if you spawn an IVS 7, you can run a script which will connect to your IVS 6, get all information about IP address, about even MAC address, because it's if it's a virtual machine, then we can impersonate the MAC address, all the file sets, all the images, all the configuration. We will put it in the IVS 7 and we will disable the IVS 6 and we will replace it. So that's maybe something we could be able to do with server as well, even if, yeah, it's more complicated because we need to make sure that the FQDN, the DNS, and all other entries are properly updated when you do that. Yes, the device fingerprint, the fingerprint on the server will complain if you hit model update, if you change the server. That's a security check we have, because we had some, once we grabbed some customer DB for debugging and we hit model update and it changed a few things, and now it just complains and tell you, hey, it's not your DB that you are changing.
My plan for that CentOS issue is simply to get a new job by the end of 2023, and then we won't have that problem to deal with. We'll just jump to some new company that's already solved that problem. That'd be the best, I think. I'm kidding, of course.
I mean, in theory, there is no reason FileWave should not be able to run on another distribution. It's for us, it's just a matter that we have limited QA boundaries. We already have Linux, Windows, Mac, and all combination to test. It already takes a lot of time. You've seen Tony's presentation about the release cycle. If we add an additional distribution, that start to be complicated to test everything and make sure that everything works properly. And the same if you have any issue with, I don't know, I mean, Debian is usually my favorite distribution. If something fails here, how do we make sure that we can fix that on all distributions? So that's the limitation we have right now. I don't see a great technical limitation. It's more resource limitation. I'm just crawling up to see if there is any question we may not have answered.
Yeah, I think everybody's wearing out a bit. The questions are slowing down, and I know I am mentally as well. We definitely want to thank everybody for joining today. These events are quite fun. I'm glad you all spent the time, and hopefully you were able to get some answers to some questions and maybe get some ideas of things you might want to do. Please do reach out to Josh and team if there are things you want to do on the professional services side, on the training side, to Derek on the support side, although I'm guessing you reach out to Derek whatever you need and his team anyway. But we thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to getting together again next time around.
Thanks, everyone. I'm looking forward to meeting you again for real and not for virtual.
Yeah, that would be fun.
If the corona pandemic is over, will there be any meetings real live in Europe? I will love that. Send emails to Jordan, sure. So she organized that. But yeah, I really miss meeting you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. We'll talk again soon. Bye.